What if everything you thought you knew about history, science, and even time itself was simply, well, an illusion? What if we're living through a period of really radical redefinition, like right now?
That's a heavy way to start.
It is. So today, we're diving deep into a recent YouTube discussion that posits precisely this, a profound reevaluation of our reality. It challenges fundamental beliefs about human origins, consciousness, the very fabric of our past.
Right. And we're pulling out some truly thought-provoking insights, stuff about forgotten civilizations, even a secret history of giants.
Exactly. So our mission here is to navigate this incredibly complex and, let's face it, provocative material. We want to help you understand the speaker's claims about what might be transforming our world, what forces could be at play, and how our own understanding of reality is being, or maybe will be, completely reshaped.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack this. It's a fascinating premise, isn't it? This idea that our collective reality is undergoing such a fundamental shift. The speaker, he starts his discussion sharing a pretty relatable personal experience.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, a recent move that forced him to redefine his understanding of rural versus wilderness. He used to think his old place was rural, but after moving, he realized, wow, this is wilderness, and his friend's rural home, actually more urban rural.
Ah, I see. So it highlights how quickly our perceptions can change just based on new experiences, new vantage points.
Exactly.
And he uses this personal story as, like, an analogy, right, for something much bigger, this global phenomenon, this necessity for humanity to redefine fundamental concepts we've always just accepted. It shows how our perception, even of simple definitions, is often relative. Depends on where you're standing. It's a great setup, actually.
It really is. And from there, he broadens it out. He introduces this concept he calls the time zone.
Okay, not like Pacific or Eastern time.
No, not geographical. He describes it as a specific temporal period. It's happening within what he labels the summer of emergence.
Oh.
And in this time zone, humanity is starting to grasp its direct involvement in this emergence.
Right, so we're realizing that what we thought we knew about time itself and our place in it is actually undergoing this huge change.
Yeah, and events are just pouring out of what he calls an event stream. They're forcing us to re-examine our most fundamental, long-held ideas, like a flood washing away old certainties.
So that this is framed as a period of shedding old ways of thinking, old precepts, especially ones inherited from the Kali Yuga.
That's the term he uses.
Yeah, and for anyone maybe not familiar, the Kali Yuga,
Yeah.
that's from Hindu scriptures, right? An age of sort of spiritual decline, darkness, conflict.
Right, where truth is supposedly at its lowest ebb.
Yeah.
He then describes the universe as this fractal complexity, as above, so below, but where complexity grows from simpler forms. And part of this emergence, he suggests, is us realizing, well, that we don't know a whole lot about anything.
It's like a massive reset button on our assumptions. A kind of necessary humbling, maybe.
Which brings us to some of his most provocative claims, especially when it comes to, the established narratives, history, science.
And this is where things get really interesting, right? He claims mainstream science, particularly Darwinism on human evolution, is just fundamentally flawed.
He asserts there are, millions and millions of objects around Earth that contradict the whole humans were just cave people 40,000 years ago idea.
So he's saying our history books might be missing some pretty major chapters.
He definitely expands on that. He posits that humanity is not the most advanced civilization to have ever existed on this planet.
Wow.
Yeah. He cites Tartaria, this idea of a lost advanced civilization across Eurasia and other pyramid cultures, as evidence. And the really striking claim is that these prior societies were often unknowingly destroyed by us, by humanity, but at the behest of unseen powers.
Okay, that's a big leap. And then there's that specific story from his own family history.
Oh, right. The giant bones anecdote. It's remarkable. He recounts how a distant, older relative back in the 1920s was supposedly paid pretty well $1 a day when regular labor got 25 cents.
Significant amount back then.
Yeah, to haul actual human giant bones from the California coast and just dump them in the ocean near Catalina Island. Dump them. And he links this to the Smithsonian, maybe connections to Freemasons, as a deliberate effort to, quote, destroy our past.
It's such a specific, almost cinematic detail meant to illustrate this larger alleged conspiracy, I suppose.
And that specific story underpins his really startling claim that our historical timeline has been deliberately altered. manipulated.
Oh, so?
He suggests an extra 1,000 years, maybe even another 2,000 years, have been just added in to make humanity seem more advanced than it actually is.
Added into the timeline. So,
For example, he speculates that what we call the medieval ages, maybe they were actually the 700s, not the 1700s.
whoa, okay. That really makes you question the foundation of our historical understanding, doesn't it? If the past is that malleable.
How can you know anything for sure? Exactly.
But it's not just history he's questioning. The discussion then shifts pretty dramatically to physics.
Right. He says physics is basically in its infancy, that the old view, relativistic rational materialism.
The idea that reality is just material, predictable, measurable laws.
Mm.
Like Newton and Einstein's framework, basically.
Yeah, that view. He says it's gone. He points to modern science now understanding atoms not as little solid balls, but as
an illusion presented by frequencies of energy moving very fast. I think I've heard physicists talk about that field-based view.
Precisely. And he delves into some specific concepts that, for him, show this new physics. He mentions the Planck minimum.
Okay, Planck constant stuff.
He describes it as the smallest possible action or energy cost for anything you do.
Right.
And then he extends that idea to qualia, defining it as the minimum energy or action needed to get a concept across.
So the universe is built on information and energy minimums, not solid stuff.
That seems to be the implication he's drawing, which leads to a really pivotal point about consciousness itself.
Which is?
He claims no physicist will ever manage to describe consciousness using mathematics because, he argues, mathematics derives from consciousness.
So math is within consciousness. It can't step outside to describe it.
Exactly. So if math flows from consciousness, well, what does that imply about reality? It completely flips the perspective, right? Consciousness isn't a byproduct of the physical world. Maybe it's the source.
Okay, that's a fundamental redefinition right there. But he says this isn't all just happening abstractly. There's a conflict element.
Yes. This redefinition isn't happening in a vacuum, according to him. He contends humanity is under a coordinated, escalating attack. He even mentions a depopulation agenda being rushed forward.
An attack by who? Or what?
He identifies the enemy as the demiurge. Now, that's a term from Gnosticism, often meaning a lesser, maybe flawed or even evil creator god, separate from the ultimate divine source.
Right, I've heard that term, like the Cathars believed in something similar.
He makes that connection, yeah, likens them to the Catharis. And this demiurge, he alleges, is running big pharma, big food, big government, implementing programs like chemtrails to make humanity, well, extinct.
Wow, okay, that's quite a claim. He connects telegraph lines and flu outbreaks, too.
Yes, links the first transcontinental telegraph lines to the first big flu outbreak, suggesting diseases are often induced. And he hints at Israeli influence as a sort of proxy war manipulation point.
Okay, just to be very clear for everyone listening, we are reporting on the claims made in the source material here, not endorsing these specific and frankly very heavy viewpoints.
Absolutely. It's crucial to make that distinction. But in counterpoint to this alleged attack, he does present a narrative of humanity awakening.
Okay, so there's pushback.
Right. He credits the internet, for instance, with allowing some free minds to cross-pollinate, fostering more independent thought, and he introduces this idea of the ontology, like the greater underlying reality or structure of existence itself being supportive, wanting humanity to succeed, almost guiding us, like a player in a video game.
So this underlying reality is on our side.
That's the idea presented. He notes that people exploring, unconventional spirituality or esoteric knowledge, the woo community, as he puts it sometimes, by studying their own consciousness, they're becoming like complexity scientists.
How so?
They're receiving feedback and feed-forward loops within this emerging reality.
Interesting.
And what's fascinating here, I think, is his emphasis on the power of ideas. Nothing is more powerful than an idea, he says, and that's what can transform humanity.
So despite these perceived attacks, there's some kind of inherent force guiding our evolution, helping us break free through new understanding.
That seems to be the perspective, yes.
So what does this awakening actually mean for the future? How does he see things playing out?
Well, he outlines a pretty dramatic shift in what he calls temporal seizes. The current 25-year period, which he says is just ending now, has been a chaos phase that induces destruction.
Okay, chaos and destruction. Sounds familiar lately.
But the next 25 years, he predicts, will be the destruction phase of illusion. Not physical destruction, but the shattering of false ideas.
Destroying illusions. And after that?
That's followed by what he calls an incredible outpouring of creativity and an innovation boom that could last for literally thousands of years.
Thousands of years of innovation. That's quite the turnaround.
It is. And this profound shift, he says, will inevitably involve redefining time itself.
How? We already talked about the time zone idea.
Yeah, he takes it further, suggests there is no future, only a continuous event stream and the constant flow of karma generated by our actions in the now.
So less linear time, more like ripples in a pond based on what we do right now, affecting what comes next immediately.
Kind of like that. A shift from a predetermined path to maybe a continuous, responsive co-creation driven by karmic feedback.
Okay, and how does this connect back to, say, the lost civilizations in history part?
He believes that as we redefine time and reality, our understanding of ancient structures will change, leading to new technologies.
Like the Tartaria stuff again.
Exactly. He describes these supposed Tartarian buildings as lacking modern plumbing, bathrooms, kitchens, yet capable of harvesting free energy directly from the atmosphere's electromagnetic base frequencies.
Free energy, how were they built?
He speculates possibly polymer concrete or maybe even 3D printed, but they're megalithic, huge, and he claims they can't be duplicated today. And pyramids, too. Initially misunderstood, he says, but now potentially being seen as power plants.
So reevaluating the past could unlock future tech, like anti-gravity vehicles he mentioned.
That's the kind of evolutionary loop he suggests is possible, yeah. Engineer relatively cool stuff like anti-gravity vehicles.
All sounds incredibly optimistic in a way, despite the chaos. But there's a catch, right?
The very important one. He emphasizes that the crucial part of this whole redefinition process is not to rush and settle on new, fixed definitions. The key is to maintain an open mind and embrace uncertainty. We might get hints, clues, but we can't see the full picture from within the complexity. So locking into new rigid beliefs would just defeat the whole purpose of this emergence.
Stay flexible, stay open.
Okay. Now, he also gave some more near-term predictions, didn't he?
Yeah.
Specific months.
He did, yeah. Looking at July through November of 2025.
Okay, what's the outlook?
For July, he predicts an elevated level of tension, but surprisingly maybe more on the happy side. He even connects it possibly to Trump the peacemaker emerging on the scene. Again, just reporting his specific phrasing.
Got it. And after July?
August sees a slight sag in that tension, but then September, October, and November are predicted to be a really rough period in this time zone.
Rev how? What happens?
He anticipates two broad reactions from people, two distinct camps.
Okay.
First, those who have been involved, maybe unknowingly serving the demiurge. In his framework, they'll experience a strong emotional backlash against their former masters, a kind of turning. Okay, that's one group. What's the other?
A much larger group, he thinks, who are just awakening to this idea of an enemy in these attacks on humanity. They will turn to a religious response.
A religious response.
Right.
Traditional religion.
He describes it as frothy, temporary, highly emotional, could extend into maybe January or February of next year. Not necessarily traditional, maybe more raw spiritual outpouring.
Which brings up a big question.
Yeah.
How does established religion fit into all this? If science is shifting towards this ontological view he talks about.
Exactly. He predicts it will inevitably affect religions, leading to turmoil, even battles in the megachurches, supposedly foreseen in old altar reports.
Battles in the churches.
That's the phrase used. He suggests this process involves a kind of degradation of that initial frothy religious response as a new scientific understanding of consciousness starts to emerge. Faith gets reevaluated.
So science and maybe spirituality start to converge in a new way, potentially causing conflict with older religious structures?
That seems to be the trajectory he's outlining, a convergence that forces a difficult reevaluation across the board.
Wow. Okay. That is a lot to take in. From redefining rural routes to redefining reality itself, cosmic battles, altered history, future innovation.
It's definitely a dense set of ideas.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you listening right now? In a world where, according to this source, our fundamental understanding of history, science, even our own origins is being called into question, where new paradigms might be emerging. What foundational beliefs might you need to redefine? And what unexpected opportunities or maybe challenges might that unleash in your own life? Something to think about.